Hey everybody, this is TJR. Last week, and I went and saw the Elton John biopic entitled Rocketman. And it's been a couple of days since I've seen it. I spent quite a bit of time trying to write this review. And the more I wrote it, the more I just felt like I was rambling. So I'm just going to talk off the top of my head and tell you what I think of the film. I should mention that Elton John's music has a tremendous amount of meaning in my life. Elton John, as a musician, is the reason why I wanted to become a musician. And yet, I didn't come into this movie with any great expectations, like this film must in some way encapsulate everything I've ever thought about Elton John. Now, did I like the movie? Yes, I found it to be very entertaining, very captivating. And a friend asked me, well, how does it compare to the Queen biopic? And I said, I would say it's a step above it. A lot of people criticized Bohemian Rhapsody, a lot of critics, I should say, criticized it for not being that historically accurate, for playing very loose and fancy-free with well-known and established facts about the band. Now, I realized this as I watched the film, but I enjoyed it as a motion picture versus as a piece of history. One of my favorite movies, and one of my favorite movies about music also, is the film Amadeus, which is a film that has a lot of fictional elements based on historical fact. And someday I should probably discuss that film in more detail. But this film, Rocketman, makes a very daring and bold move. Early on, when the first trailer was released, I posted a video where I speculated on the possibility that this film might in fact be a musical. That's exactly what happened. The film was a musical. I think that making it a musical was a very bold move, a very innovative move, and that it definitely helped to elevate it above the standard biopic. These music biopics, they tend to follow a certain formula. You know, we see the music artist when they're very young, when they're just a child, and we see some of the difficulties they faced in childhood. Then we see them take their first steps towards learning how to play music. Then we see them take their first steps into the music industry. We see them begin to take their first steps to becoming famous. Then they become huge. Then their lives spiral out of control, and this usually involves drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and lots of emotional baggage from their past. They hit rock bottom, and then they have a revelation. They begin to reconnect with what made them a musician in the first place, and they are reborn. And then we have the ending credits where we show a montage of where everybody that we saw in the movie is now and what happened to them after. The film Rocketman follows these tropes, just like all these other films do, but instead, the music of Elton John, instead of just being used to show, well, here he is writing the song, which we do see that. Here he is performing his music live, which we do see that. The music is also used to help move the story forward, to help us get into the heads of the characters in the film, and not just Elton John, but other people in his life. The song Goodbye Yellow Brick Road gets used twice. The first time is when Bernie Taupin, Elton John's longtime songwriting partner, decides to back away from the decadent 70s rock star life and basically reassess. And then it's used again when Elton John decides he needs to do the same and checks himself into the Betty Ford Clinic. By making this film a musical fantasy, we are freed from a lot of the expectations from a biopic. Early on, there's a scene where we see Elton John pitching songs to Dick James Music. And this is in the early 70s, before he ever records his first album. And he pitches the song, I guess that's why they call it the blues, a song that wouldn't be written until much, much, much later, decades later. In a standard biopic, we'd all be calling foul. That's just an outrageous inaccuracy. But at the same time, this film has a scene where Elton John tries to commit suicide by snorting a whole bunch of cocaine. He takes a whole bunch of pills, and then he throws himself off the diving board into his swimming pool. And when he gets to the bottom, there's a young child version of himself at the bottom of the pool, wearing a space helmet, sitting at a toy piano and singing Rocketman. So instead of trying to be historically accurate or have the veneer of being historically accurate, this film instead tries to be a work of art in its own right, and also get us into the headspace of its main character, which is Elton John, a man who very early on in life wanted love and couldn't get it, and therefore wanted to make the whole world love him, but who didn't realize until he was middle-aged, basically, that he had to learn to love himself before he could expect anyone else to love him. And this is the character's story arc in this film. Now, I oftentimes complain that these music biopics seem to center more on the personal aspects of the life and the drug addiction, all of that stuff, the more darker aspects, than on the actual music, on the creation of the music. I was glad that the Queen biopic actually did take some time to show at least a little bit of the creation of the songs and what went into some of the creative process. We do get some of that in here as well, though not as much as I would have liked. However, though, just like with the Queen biopic, I feel like this film, if it's being watched by someone who's only casually familiar with Elton's music, that it, I think, would really definitely help inspire newcomers to become more interested and to hopefully, after they see the movie, go out and check out more of the artist's catalog. I feel like the Queen movie would have a similar effect, and I hope I'm right about that. I want to say that I was just extremely impressed with Taron Egerton's performance, not just his acting, which is fantastic, but also the fact that he sang all these songs. Elton John is not easy to sing. Elton is one of those vocalists who not only has a unique voice, but in his heyday had this tremendous range. And generally speaking, his comfortable area was where the voices of most men break. I've always found it difficult to sing Elton John because my voice breaks at the point where he's generally in 50% of the range that he sings in, most of the time. Elton was definitely an extremely blessed individual. He was a very gifted musician. He was a very gifted composer. He was a very gifted vocalist. He couldn't write his own lyrics, so Bernie Taupin was this perfect partner for him. And yet, even though he couldn't write his own lyrics, he sang Bernie's lyrics so convincingly, as if he had written them himself, as if he had lived all the experiences in these different songs. In many respects, when we hear Elton John singing on his records, he is an actor, he is performing, and he is living the lives of the characters that Bernie writes about. Elton was not the words that we hear in these songs, but he made us believe that he was. And for that reason, I think it's kind of appropriate that this movie is very much a musical fantasy, which is not to say that there aren't kernels of truth. There are many documented periods of his life that we see in this motion picture. And the main kernel of truth is just, of course, is his personal journey. I'm not sure that any motion picture can truly cover a legendary music artist's life, which is why I'm not sure at this point I even want to see like a Led Zeppelin biopic or a Beatles biopic. I just don't think it's possible to really properly cover the lives of these legendary artists within a 2 or 2.5 hour motion picture. So once again, making this musical fantasy is probably the best move I think they could have made. Turn this individual's life and their music into another piece of art. It's weird how this film has made me feel the more I've thought about it. I really enjoyed this film. It was so engaging, so entertaining, and yet it has made me begin to really think that we really don't need any more music biopics, that maybe we just shouldn't have them. What we really need are in-depth documentaries, and in fact, on the level of, say, Ken Burns, where we have a multi-part documentary. Instead of watching a Beatles biopic, go watch the Beatles anthology instead. So yeah, maybe if they do make a Led Zeppelin biopic, maybe it needs to be completely removed from the truth. Maybe it just has to have only a few kernels of truth in it, and otherwise it's just a complete work of fiction based on truth. These artists were larger than life, so maybe the motion pictures need to be larger than life too. Save the real stuff for the documentaries and the books. Otherwise though, I had a great time with this film. I just loved everybody's performances. I also want to point out Jamie Bell, who played Bernie Taupin. His performance is very sweet and very understated, and I fear that it will be overshadowed by the amazing performance by Taron Egerton. In my opinion, Rocketman is a better movie than Bohemian Rhapsody because it knows it's a movie. This is TJR. What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I really just do appreciate everybody that clicks like and clicks subscribes and shares these videos. It means a lot to me. And a big shout out to all my Patreon supporters who are definitely helping me make more videos. And if you'd like to be a Patreon supporter, please click the link here under more info or floating overhead at some point very soon, if not right now during this video. Everybody, thanks so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.